The murmurs started the moment Ophelia Winters stepped off the dusty boardwalk and into the middle of Main Street, her face tilted toward the gray Colorado sky as the first fat raindrops began to fall on the parched earth of Ordway in the summer of 1882. The drought had lasted 3 months, turning the landscape into a palette of browns and yellows, and when those clouds finally rolled in from the west, most folks rushed inside to avoid getting wet, clutching their parcels and lifting their skirts above the mud that would inevitably form. But Ophelia stood there, 22 years old and beautiful, in a way that made the town's matrons nervous, her arms spread wide as the rain began to soak through her simple cotton dress. She started spinning slowly at first, then faster, her dark hair coming loose from its pins as she laughed with pure, unfiltered joy. The sound carried down the street, and faces appeared in windows, expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Ophelia did not care. She had not felt rain on her skin in so long, had not experienced anything that felt this free since she arrived in this suffocating town 6 months ago to live with her aunt after her parents died in a fire back in Kansas City. The rain fell harder, and she danced like a child, splashing in the puddles forming in the wagon ruts, spinning and laughing as thunder rumbled overhead. Disgraceful, Mrs. Henderson said loudly from beneath the awning of the general store, her voice carrying across the street. At her age, acting like a heathen child. No wonder she cannot find a husband. Perhaps the sun addled her brain, another woman suggested, though her tone made it clear she thought something far worse was wrong with Ophelia. Ophelia heard them but did not stop. Let them talk. They had been talking since she arrived anyway, criticizing everything from the way she wore her hair to the fact that she had no interest in the eligible men they kept trying to parade before her. She was tired of living according to their narrow rules, tired of pretending to be someone she was not. If dancing in the rain was a sin, then she would gladly be a sinner. The rain fell harder still, turning the street into a muddy river, and most of the onlookers retreated inside. Ophelia could feel the weight of their judgment, even through the closed doors and windows, but in this moment, she felt alive in a way she had not since before her parents died. The grief had been crushing, suffocating, but here in the rain, she could breathe. She did not notice the rider until his horse stopped a few feet away from her. Ophelia blinked water from her eyes and looked up at the man astride a large bay gelding. He was tall even sitting down, with broad shoulders and a worn Stetson that was already soaked through. His face was angular, with a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, and his eyes were the color of whiskey in sunlight. He looked to be in his mid-20s, and there was something in his expression that was not judgment or disgust, but rather curiosity, and something else she could not quite name. "You know they are all watching you," he said, his voice deep and carrying a hint of amusement. "Talking about you." "I know," Ophelia replied, lifting her chin. "I do not particularly care what they think." The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "That much is obvious." He swung down from his horse in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the muddy street with a wet squelch. He was even taller standing, and the rain was soaking through his shirt, making it cling to a lean, muscled frame. "Vincent Lawson," he said, tipping his hat to her despite the rain. "I just rode into town this morning, looking for work at one of the ranches." "Ophelia Winters," she said, still spinning slowly, her skirts heavy with water. "You picked an interesting day to arrive." "Seems like the most interesting thing to happen in this town in a long while," Vincent said, his eyes never leaving her face. "The way everyone is acting, you would think you were committing murder instead of enjoying the rain." Ophelia laughed, a sound that was both bitter and joyful. "In their eyes, I might as well be. A woman is supposed to be demure, quiet, always proper. Dancing in the street like a child is apparently beyond the pale." Vincent looked around at the closed doors and disapproving faces in the windows. Then he did something that shocked Ophelia down to her bones. He took off his hat, tossed it onto his saddle, and stepped into the middle of the street beside her. "Well then," he said, extending his hand to her, If you are going to be condemned for dancing, you might as well have a partner. Ophelia stared at his outstretched hand, at the rainwater running down his arm, at the challenge and invitation in his eyes. No one had ever joined her in anything that might invite scandal. No one had ever chosen to stand with her rather than against her. She felt something warm unfurl in her chest, something that had been cold and closed off since her parents died. She placed her hand in his. Vincent pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers, and they began to dance in the rain-soaked street. There was no music except for the drumming of rain on the wooden buildings and the rumble of thunder overhead, but they did not need it. Vincent led her through steps that were part waltz, part something wilder and freer, spinning her out and pulling her back in, and Ophelia followed, her laughter ringing out again. The mud splashed up around their feet. Their clothes were completely soaked through, and she had never felt more alive. Behind the windows, the disapproval intensified. She could feel it like a physical weight, but Vincent was grinning now, a full, genuine smile that transformed his serious face into something boyish and beautiful. He spun her faster, and she let her head fall back, rain pelting her face, joy bubbling up from somewhere deep inside that she had thought was dead. "They are going to talk about this for weeks," she said breathlessly when he pulled her close again. "Let them talk," Vincent replied, and there was something fierce in his voice. "Their opinions are worth about as much as mud on a boot." They danced until they were both gasping for breath, until the rain began to ease into a steady drizzle, until Ophelia's aunt appeared on the boardwalk outside her small house at the end of the street, her face pinched with fury. "Ophelia Winters, you get inside this house this instant." Ophelia felt the reality of her situation crash back down around her. She stepped back from Vincent, suddenly aware of how improper this must look, how her dress was clinging to every curve of her body, how her hair hung in wet tangles down her back. "I should go," she said quietly. Vincent's hand tightened briefly on hers before he let her go. "Will you be all right?" She nodded, though she was not entirely sure that was true. Her aunt would have plenty to say about this, and none of it would be pleasant. "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes, "for dancing with me, for not caring what they think." "I meant what I said," Vincent told her. "Their opinions are worthless. You were just dancing in the rain. There is no sin in that." "Try telling them that," Ophelia said with a small smile. Then she turned and walked toward her aunt's house, feeling the weight of the town's judgment with every step. But she also felt something else, something warm and bright and new. She felt seen. For the first time since coming to Ordway, someone had looked at her and not found her lacking. Her aunt's fury was immediate and overwhelming. Aunt Margaret grabbed Ophelia's arm the moment she stepped through the door and pulled her inside, slamming the door behind them. "Have you lost your mind?" she hissed, her thin face white with rage. "Dancing in the street like a common saloon girl, and then with a strange man, a drifter by the looks of him. Do you have any idea what people will say? What this will do to my reputation?" "I was dancing in the rain," Ophelia said wearily, water dripping from her clothes onto the floor. "That is all." "That is all?" Aunt Margaret's voice rose to a shriek. "You were making a spectacle of yourself in front of the entire town, and then that man, that stranger, putting his hands on you where everyone could see. You are ruined, Ophelia. Absolutely ruined. No decent man will want you now." "Perhaps I do not want a decent man," Ophelia shot back, her own temper rising. "Perhaps I am tired of being told what I can and cannot do, how I must behave every moment of every day. I was happy, Aunt Margaret. For the first time in months, I felt something other than grief and suffocation. Is that so terrible?" Her aunt's eyes were cold. "Yes," she said flatly. "It is, because now I will have to work twice as hard to salvage your reputation, and mine along with it. You will not leave this house for the next week. You will stay in your room, and you will think about what you have done. And if I ever see you behaving like that again, I will send you to your uncle in Ohio, and you can see how you like living on a farm in the middle of nowhere with no society at all." Ophelia wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all, but she was tired and cold and suddenly desperate to be alone. She went to her small room at the back of the house, peeled off her wet clothes, and wrapped herself in a blanket. Through the window, she could see the rain still falling, lighter now, but steady. Somewhere out there, Vincent Lawson was probably finding a place to stable his horse and looking for work. She wondered if she would ever see him again, or if he would be just another person passing through her life. She touched her waist where his hand had rested, remembering the warmth of his palm even through the wet fabric, the way he had looked at her like she was something precious rather than something shameful. She wanted to hold on to that feeling, to keep it safe inside her chest, where her aunt's words could not reach it. Vincent Lawson, meanwhile, was leading his horse toward the livery stable, very aware of the stares he was receiving from every person he passed. The town was small enough that news traveled fast, and he had no doubt that every resident now knew about the stranger who had danced with the scandalous Miss Winters in the rain. He did not regret it. In fact, he could not remember the last time he had done something that felt so right. The girl, Ophelia, had been luminous in her joy, uninhibited and free in a way that most people never allowed themselves to be. And when he had seen the way the townspeople were judging her, condemning her for something so innocent and pure, something hot and angry had risen in his chest. He had spent too much of his life following other people's rules, living up to other people's expectations. His father had been a strict, unyielding man who believed there was only one right way to live, and Vincent had left home at 18 because he could not breathe under the weight of those expectations. He had spent the last 7 years drifting from town to town, ranch to ranch, working as a cowboy and trying to figure out who he was without his father's voice in his head telling him he was doing everything wrong. Seeing Ophelia dance in the rain, seeing her choose joy despite the judgment, had struck something deep inside him, and dancing with her, holding her in his arms as the rain poured down and the thunder rolled overhead, had felt like the most honest thing he had done in years. The livery stable was run by an older man with gray hair and kind eyes who introduced himself as Tom Garrett. "You are the fellow who danced with Miss Winters," he said as Vincent led his horse into a stall. "Word travels fast," Vincent said dryly. Tom chuckled. "In a town this size, everything travels fast. Do not pay too much mind to the gossips. Most of them are just bored and looking for something to talk about. Though I will say, you have made quite an impression for your first day in town." "Is that good or bad?" Vincent asked, unsaddling his horse and beginning to rub him down with a handful of straw. "Depends on who you ask," Tom said. "The church ladies will clutch their pearls and declare you a corrupting influence. The menfolk will probably think you are either very brave or very stupid." "Me? I thought it was about the nicest thing I have seen in a while. That girl has had a hard time of it since she came to live with Margaret Winters. Her aunt is a cold woman, always has been. Cares more about what people think than about actual people." Vincent filed that information away, his jaw tightening. "She seemed happy, just dancing in the rain. I do not see the harm in it." "There is not any harm in it," Tom agreed. "But folks around here, they have strict ideas about how a young lady should behave. And Margaret has been trying to marry Ophelia off to one of the local men since she arrived. Having her niece dancing in the street like a wild thing does not help those efforts." He paused, studying Vincent with shrewd eyes. "You looking for work?" "I am," Vincent confirmed. "Any ranches around here hiring?" "The Double Creek Ranch, about 5 miles north of town, has been looking for hands. Owner is a man named Robert Fletcher. Fair employer, pays on time. I could give you directions if you are interested." "I appreciate it," Vincent said. He needed work, needed a place to stay for a while, and build up his savings before moving on. He always moved on eventually. Staying in one place too long made him restless, made him feel like he was back in that house with his father, trapped and suffocating. But as he finished tending to his horse and stepped back out into the drizzle, his thoughts kept returning to dark hair, and laughing eyes, to the feel of a slender waist beneath his hand and the sound of joy ringing through the rain. The week that followed was difficult for Ophelia. True to her word, Aunt Margaret kept her confined to the house, allowing her out of her room only for meals, which were eaten in tense silence. The rain had broken the drought, bringing relief to the farmers and ranchers in the area, but Ophelia felt like she was withering inside the four walls of her aunt's house. She spent hours staring out the window, watching the town go about its business, feeling more isolated than ever. She thought about Vincent constantly. She did not know why he had done what he did, why he had chosen to dance with her when it would have been so much easier to ride on past, to ignore her like everyone else did. But he had not ignored her. He had seen her, truly seen her, and he had joined her without hesitation. That meant something. It had to mean something. On the 8th day, Aunt Margaret finally allowed her to leave the house, though with strict instructions about her behavior. You will go to the general store, purchase the items on this list, and return directly home, her aunt said, pressing a piece of paper and some coins into Ophelia's hand. You will not linger, you will not speak to anyone beyond what is necessary, and you will certainly not do anything that might invite further scandal. Do you understand? Yes, Aunt Margaret, Ophelia said, though the words tasted like ash in her mouth. She took the list and the money and stepped outside, blinking in the bright sunlight. The world seemed almost too vivid after a week of being cooped up inside, the colors too bright, the sounds too loud. She walked slowly down the dusty street, aware of the eyes on her, the whispers that followed in her wake. Inside the general store, Mrs. Henderson was behind the counter, her expression sour as she watched Ophelia enter. Miss Winters, she said coldly, I suppose your aunt has finally let you out. She has, Ophelia replied, keeping her voice even. She handed over the list, and Mrs. Henderson began gathering the items with barely concealed disdain. You know, my dear, the older woman said as she wrapped a bundle of fabric, it is not too late to salvage your reputation. If you were to apologize to the community, to show proper remorse for your behavior, people might be willing to forgive you. Mr. Thompson's son is still unmarried, and he has expressed some interest despite everything. Ophelia had met Mr. Thompson's son. He was a pinched, humorless man of 40 who looked at her like she was a broodmare he was considering purchasing. I have nothing to apologize for, she said quietly. I danced in the rain, that is all. Mrs. Henderson's lips thinned. You danced in the street with a strange man behaving in a manner unbefitting a lady. But I suppose if you cannot see the error of your ways, there is no helping you. She finished wrapping the items and pushed them across the counter. That will be $2.30. Ophelia paid and gathered her parcels, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the store. As she stepped back out into the sunlight, she nearly collided with someone coming up the steps. Strong hands caught her arms, steadying her, and she looked up into familiar whiskey-colored eyes. Miss Winters, Vincent said, and there was warmth in his voice that made her chest ache. It is good to see you. Mr. Lawson, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady, even as her heart raced. You are still in town. I am. I found work at the Double Creek Ranch. He released her arms but did not step back, and Ophelia was acutely aware of how close they were standing, how she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar. I have been hoping to see you again. I heard your aunt kept you confined to the house. Word travels fast, Ophelia said, echoing what he had said to Tom Garrett that first day, though she had not been there to hear it. Vincent smiled slightly. It does. Are you all right? I have been worried. The fact that he had been worried about her, that he had been thinking about her at all, made something warm bloom in Ophelia's chest. I am well enough, she said, though I am under strict orders to behave myself and not invite any further scandal. Is talking to me inviting scandal? Vincent asked, and there was something challenging in his tone, something that made her want to laugh. Probably, Ophelia admitted, but I find I do not care as much as I should. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, and Ophelia felt the world narrow down to just the two of them, to the space between them that felt charged with something electric. Then Mrs. Henderson's voice cut through the moment like a knife. Miss Winters, I do believe your aunt expected you home by now. Ophelia stepped back reluctantly, clutching her parcels. I should go, she said to Vincent, though everything in her wanted to stay, to keep talking to him, to memorize the way he looked at her. May I walk you home? Vincent asked. It would not be proper for you to carry all those packages by yourself. It was a transparent excuse, and they both knew it, but Ophelia found herself nodding. That would be kind of you, Mr. Lawson. They walked slowly down the street, painfully aware of the eyes watching them from every window and doorway. Vincent took some of the heavier parcels from her, and they walked close enough that their arms occasionally brushed, sending sparks of awareness through Ophelia each time. How are you finding the Double Creek Ranch? Ophelia asked, desperate to fill the silence with something other than the sound of her own racing heartbeat. It is good work, Vincent said. The owner, Mr. Fletcher, is a fair man. The other ranch hands are decent enough. It is a beautiful piece of land, right up against the creek. There are cottonwood trees growing along the water, and in the evening you can hear the birds singing. It reminds me of better times before I left home. Why did you leave home? Ophelia asked, then immediately felt embarrassed by her forwardness. I apologize. That was too personal a question. No, it is all right, Vincent said. He was quiet for a moment, and Ophelia thought he might not answer, but then he spoke again. My father had very specific ideas about who I should be, what I should do with my life. He wanted me to take over his mercantile business, to marry a girl from a good family, to live the life he had planned for me. But I could not breathe in that life. I felt like I was dying slowly, piece by piece. So I left. I have been working as a cowboy ever since, moving from place to place. Do you regret it? Ophelia asked quietly. Leaving? Vincent considered this. Sometimes, he admitted. I miss my mother. She was a kind woman, though she never stood up to my father. But I do not regret choosing my own path, even if it has been a lonely one at times. He glanced at her. What about you? Tom Garrett mentioned you came here to live with your aunt after your parents died. That must have been difficult. Ophelia felt the familiar ache of grief rise in her chest. They died in a fire, she said, her voice tight. Our house in Kansas City. I was visiting a friend for the weekend, and when I came home, there was nothing left but ashes. My aunt was my only living relative, so I came here, but she is nothing like my parents. They encouraged me to be curious, to think for myself, to find joy where I could. My aunt wants me to be silent and obedient and marry the first man who will have me. That sounds suffocating, Vincent said, and there was understanding in his voice that made Ophelia want to cry. Someone understood. Finally, someone understood. They had reached her aunt's house, and Ophelia stopped at the bottom of the steps, not ready for this conversation to end. Thank you, she said, for walking with me, for listening. Vincent handed her the parcels he had been carrying, but his hand lingered on hers for just a moment. Miss Winters, Ophelia, I know this is forward, but would you consider meeting me sometime, away from the town's prying eyes? I would like to talk to you more, to get to know you better. Ophelia's heart leaped. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, that meeting a man in secret would only invite more scandal, more judgment. But the part of her that had danced in the rain, the part that yearned for freedom and connection, whispered yes. There is a place, she said quietly, about a mile south of town, near where the creek bends. There are willow trees there, and it is secluded. I used to go there to be alone before my aunt restricted my movements. Could you meet me there tomorrow afternoon? Around 3? I will be there, Vincent promised. and the warmth in his eyes made Ophelia feel like she could fly. She forced herself to turn and walk up the steps, to go inside the house where her aunt was waiting with questions about what had taken her so long. But as she endured Aunt Margaret's interrogation and put away the supplies, all she could think about was tomorrow, about the willow trees and the creek and Vincent's smile. The next afternoon, Ophelia waited until her aunt was taking her usual afternoon nap, then slipped out of the house as quietly as she could. Her heart pounded as she hurried down the back streets of town, avoiding the main thoroughfare where someone might see her and report back to Aunt Margaret. The walk to the creek seemed to take forever, but finally she pushed through the brush and emerged into the small clearing where the willow trees grew, their long branches dipping into the water. Vincent was already there, standing with his back to her as he looked out over the creek. He had removed his hat, and she could see the way the sunlight caught in his dark hair, turning it almost bronze. He turned when he heard her approach, and his whole face lit up with a smile that made her breathless. "You came," he said, and there was relief in his voice, as if he had been worried she might change her mind. "I said I would," Ophelia replied, moving to stand beside him. The creek burbled over smooth stones, and a gentle breeze rustled the willow branches, creating dappled patterns of light and shadow on the ground. "This place has always felt like a refuge to me, a place where I could think and breathe without feeling judged." "It is beautiful," Vincent said. Then more softly, "Though not as beautiful as you." Ophelia felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had been complimented before, usually by men who wanted something from her. But this felt different. When Vincent looked at her, she felt seen, truly seen, in a way that went beyond mere physical appearance. "You hardly know me," she said, trying to keep her voice light. "Then let me know you," Vincent replied. He moved closer, and Ophelia could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool shade of the willows. "Tell me everything. What makes you happy? What do you dream about? What do you want from life?" No one had ever asked her those questions before. No one had ever cared what she wanted. Ophelia sat down on the grassy bank, and Vincent settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I want freedom," she said finally. "I want to live without constantly worrying about what other people think of me. I want to laugh and dance and feel alive without being condemned for it. I want to matter to someone, to be valued for who I am rather than who I am supposed to be." She looked at him. "Is that foolish?" "No," Vincent said firmly. "It is not foolish at all. It is honest and brave, and I think those are rare qualities." He picked up a smooth stone from the bank and turned it over in his hands. "I want similar things. I want to find a place where I belong, where I can put down roots without feeling trapped. I want to build something that is mine, something I can be proud of. And I want to find someone who sees me for who I really am, not who they think I should be." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the water flow past, listening to the birds singing in the trees. Ophelia felt more at peace than she had in months, maybe years. Being with Vincent was easy in a way that nothing else in her life had been since her parents died. "Tell me about them," Vincent said quietly. "Your parents." Ophelia took a shaky breath. It hurt to talk about them, but she also wanted to. Wanted someone to know who they had been, what they had meant to her. "My father was a bookkeeper," she said. "He was quiet and thoughtful, and he loved to read. He would read to me every night when I was a child, stories about far-off places and grand adventures. My mother was a seamstress. She had the most beautiful singing voice, and she would sing while she worked. They loved each other so much. You could see it in the way they looked at each other, the way they would reach for each other's hands without thinking about it." "They sound wonderful," Vincent said gently. "They were, and they wanted me to be happy, to live a full life. They would have hated seeing me trapped in my aunt's house, slowly withering away." Ophelia brushed at her eyes, angry at the tears that threatened to fall. "I miss them so much." Vincent reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. I am sorry, he said simply. I am sorry you lost them, and I am sorry you have been so alone since. Ophelia looked down at their joined hands, at the way his thumb was gently stroking across her knuckles. I do not feel alone right now, she whispered. Neither do I, Vincent replied, and when she looked up, his eyes were intense, full of something that made her breath catch. Ophelia, I know we have only just met, but I feel something when I am with you. Something I have never felt before, like I have been looking for you my whole life without knowing it. I feel it too, Ophelia admitted. It terrifies me and thrills me at the same time. Vincent lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, courtly, but it sent heat racing through Ophelia's entire body. Then let us be terrified and thrilled together, he said with a small smile. They met at the willow trees every day for the next 2 weeks. Ophelia would slip away in the afternoon while her aunt napped, and Vincent would take a break from his work at the ranch, and they would spend hours talking, learning each other's secrets and dreams and fears. Vincent told her about growing up under his father's heavy hand, about the loneliness of drifting from town to town, about the beauty of sleeping under the stars and waking up to watch the sunrise over open rangeland. Ophelia told him about her childhood in Kansas City, about the books she loved to read, about the fire that had taken her parents, and how she sometimes still woke up choking on phantom smoke. They also did more than talk. Vincent taught her how to skip stones across the creek, standing behind her with his arms around hers to demonstrate the proper wrist flick. Ophelia braided flowers into chains and draped them around his neck, laughing at how ridiculous the tough cowboy looked wearing daisies. They waded into the creek on hot days, cooling off in the shallow water and splashing each other like children. And sometimes they would just sit in comfortable silence, shoulders pressed together, hands intertwined, watching the clouds drift across the Colorado sky. With each passing day, Ophelia fell deeper in love. She had not meant to, had tried to protect her heart, but Vincent made it impossible. He was kind and funny and strong, but also gentle in ways she had not expected. He listened when she talked, really listened, and he remembered things she said. He brought her wildflowers he had picked on his rides across the ranch. He told her she was beautiful, but also told her she was smart, clever, brave. He made her feel valued in a way no one else ever had. Vincent was falling just as hard. He had never believed in love at first sight, had always thought it was something invented by poets and romantics. But from the moment he had seen Ophelia dancing in the rain, something inside him had recognized something inside her. Being with her felt like coming home after years of wandering. She challenged him, made him laugh, made him want to be better. And when she looked at him with those expressive eyes, he felt like he could do anything, be anything. But they both knew their time together was stolen, secretive. Ordway was a small town with narrow minds, and Ophelia's reputation was already damaged. If anyone found out about their meetings, the scandal would be enormous. Vincent had started to think about the future, about what it would mean to court Ophelia properly, to ask for her hand in marriage. But he had nothing to offer her except his saddle, his horse, and whatever wages he could earn as a ranch hand. What kind of life was that for a woman like her? The question came to a head one afternoon in late August when they were sitting on the creek bank, Ophelia's head resting on Vincent's shoulder. What happens when summer ends? She asked quietly. When the work at the ranch slows down and you move on to the next town. Vincent's chest tightened. He had been avoiding thinking about that, about the inevitable end of the season and the restlessness that would surely follow. But with Ophelia beside him, the idea of leaving felt impossible, unbearable. I do not know, he admitted. I have always moved on before. That is what I do, what I have always done. But this time feels different. Different how? Ophelia asked, lifting her head to look at him. Vincent cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking across her cheekbones. Different because of you. Because for the first time in my life, I want to stay. I want to build something permanent. But I have nothing, Ophelia. No land, no house, barely any savings. What kind of future can I offer you? Ophelia's eyes were bright with tears. I do not need land or a house or money. I just need you, but we cannot keep meeting in secret forever. Eventually, someone will find out, and the consequences will be severe. My aunt will send me away, and I will never see you again. Then we need to change the situation, Vincent said firmly. I will talk to your aunt. I will ask permission to court you properly. I have a steady job. Mr. Fletcher seems to like my work. Maybe he would consider selling me a piece of his land eventually, letting me start my own spread. It would take time, but I could build something for us. If you would want that, if you would want a life with me. Are you asking me to marry you? Ophelia whispered, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Not yet, Vincent said, and he smiled, even as his own eyes grew suspiciously bright. When I ask you to marry me, it will be proper, the way you deserve. But I am asking if you would consider a future with me, if you think you could love a wandering cowboy who wants nothing more than to make you happy. I already love you, Ophelia said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. I have loved you since you danced with me in the rain, since you looked at me like I was something precious instead of something shameful. I love you, Vincent Lawson. And yes, I want a future with you. I do not care if we have to start with nothing. As long as we are together, that is enough. Vincent pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, but she did not care. She buried her face in his chest, feeling his heart racing as fast as hers. I love you too, he said into her hair. I love you so much it scares me. But I promise you, Ophelia, I will do everything in my power to make this work, to give you the life you deserve. They held each other as the afternoon sun slanted through the willow branches, making promises in the shelter of the trees that had become their sanctuary. Ophelia knew the road ahead would not be easy. Her aunt would not approve, the town would gossip, and building a life from nothing would be hard work. But she was not afraid, not with Vincent beside her. That evening, Vincent rode into town with his heart in his throat and his best shirt on. He had washed up at the creek before coming, wanting to make a good impression, though he suspected Aunt Margaret would not approve of him regardless of how clean his shirt was. The Winters house was small but neat, painted white with dark green shutters. He tied his horse to the hitching post out front and climbed the steps, his boots sounding loud on the wooden porch. He knocked 3 times and waited, his stomach churning with nerves. He had faced down stampeding cattle and wild horses without flinching, but the prospect of confronting Aunt Margaret terrified him. The door opened, and the thin, pinched-faced woman he remembered from the day it rained looked him up and down with obvious disdain. "Mr. Lawson," she said coldly, "I thought I made it clear that Ophelia was not to associate with you." "Mrs. Winters," Vincent said, removing his hat respectfully, "I have come to ask permission to court your niece properly. I know we got off to an unfortunate start, but my intentions are honorable. I have steady work at the Double Creek Ranch, and I would like the opportunity to prove to you that I am a suitable match for Ophelia." Aunt Margaret's laugh was sharp and humorless. "A suitable match? You are a drifting cowboy with no prospects and no family connections. My niece may have damaged her reputation with her foolish behavior, but she can still do better than you." Vincent felt anger rise in his chest, but he forced it down. Getting angry would not help Ophelia. "With respect, madam, I may not have much, but I am hardworking and honest. I care deeply for Ophelia, and I believe she cares for me. I am not asking you to give your blessing to a marriage right away. I am simply asking for the chance to court her properly, in the open, so we can see where this leads." "The answer is no," Aunt Margaret said flatly. "Absolutely not. Ophelia needs a husband with prospects, someone who can provide her with stability and position in society. You cannot give her that. And frankly, after the scandal you both created, the best thing you could do for her is to leave town and never come back." Vincent stared at her, realizing with sinking certainty that no amount of arguing would change this woman's mind. She had decided he was not good enough for her niece, and that was that. "Does Ophelia get a say in this?" he asked quietly. "She is under my guardianship and will do as I say," Aunt Margaret replied. "Now please leave, Mr. Lawson, before I have the sheriff remove you." Vincent wanted to argue further, wanted to demand to see Ophelia, but he knew it would only make things worse. He put his hat back on, tipped it coldly to Aunt Margaret, and walked back to his horse. As he rode away, he glanced back at the house and saw a curtain move in an upstairs window. A pale face appeared briefly, dark eyes wide and frightened, before the curtain fell back into place. "Ophelia!" She had heard everything. Vincent's chest ached with the need to go back, to climb up to that window and take her away from that miserable house and that miserable woman. But he could not. Not yet. He needed a plan, needed to figure out how they could be together without destroying Ophelia's life completely. Back inside the house, Ophelia pressed her forehead against the cool glass of her bedroom window and fought back tears. She had heard every word of the conversation downstairs, had heard her aunt dismiss Vincent without a second thought. The injustice of it burned in her chest. Why did her aunt get to decide who she could and could not see? Why did society get to dictate who was worthy and who was not, based on arbitrary standards of wealth and position? A soft knock on her door made her turn. Aunt Margaret entered without waiting for permission, her face set in hard lines. "You have been meeting him in secret," she said, and it was not a question. "I suspected as much when you started slipping out of the house during my naps. How could you be so foolish, Ophelia? How could you risk what little reputation you have left?" "I love him," Ophelia said, lifting her chin defiantly. "And he loves me. That should matter more than his occupation or his bank account." "Love," Aunt Margaret scoffed. "Love is a luxury for people with money and position. You need security, Ophelia. You need a husband who can provide for you, who can give you a respectable place in society. Mr. Lawson can give you none of those things. He is a drifter, and he will leave you the moment something better comes along." "You are wrong about him," Ophelia said fiercely. "Vincent is good and kind and honorable. He sees me as a person, not as a burden or a problem to be solved. That is worth more than all the money and position in the world." Aunt Margaret's expression turned calculating. "You will not see him again," she said. "I am writing to your uncle in Ohio tomorrow. He has agreed to take you in, to find you a suitable husband among the farming families there. You will leave Ordway in 2 weeks." Ophelia felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "No," she whispered. "You cannot send me away." "I can and I will," Aunt Margaret said coldly. "It is for your own good, Ophelia. One day you will thank me for saving you from a life of poverty and disappointment." She turned and left the room, and Ophelia heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. She was trapped. Ophelia sank onto her bed, her mind racing. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks before she would be sent away to Ohio, away from Vincent, away from any chance at happiness. She could not let that happen. She would not let her aunt control her life like this. The next day, Vincent returned to the willow trees at their usual meeting time, hoping desperately that Ophelia had found a way to slip out. He waited for 2 hours, but she never came. His worry grew with each passing minute. Something was wrong. He could feel it. He rode back to town as the sun was setting, unsure what to do. He could not go to the house again. Aunt Margaret had made her position clear. But he needed to know that Ophelia was all right, needed to find a way to reach her. Tom Garrett was closing up the livery stable when Vincent rode up. The older man took one look at Vincent's face and sighed. "I heard Margaret turned you away last night," he said. "Word is she is sending Miss Ophelia to Ohio," to live with her brother. Vincent's blood ran cold. When? 2 weeks, I heard. She is already making arrangements for the train ticket. Tom shook his head. It is a shame. That girl deserves better than being shuffled around like an unwanted parcel. I have to talk to her, Vincent said, his mind racing. I have to find a way to see her before she leaves. Tom was quiet for a moment. Then he glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Margaret goes to the church auxiliary meeting every Thursday evening, stays there for about 2 hours. If you were to happen by the house during that time, and if you were to happen to know that Ophelia's room is the window on the second floor at the back of the house, well, I would not know anything about that. Vincent met the older man's eyes, understanding passing between them. Thank you, he said quietly. Do not thank me yet, Tom said. If you are going to do something foolish, at least be smart about it. And if you care about that girl, you had better have a real plan for taking care of her. Because if you break her heart, you will have me to answer to. I would never hurt her, Vincent said fiercely. I love her. Then prove it, Tom said simply. Thursday evening arrived with agonizing slowness. Vincent watched from a distance as Aunt Margaret left the house, dressed in her Sunday best and carrying a basket. He waited another 15 minutes to be sure she was truly gone, then rode around to the back of the house. Ophelia's window was dark, but as he drew closer, he saw the curtain twitch. A moment later, the window opened and Ophelia's face appeared. Vincent! She gasped, leaning out. What are you doing here? I had to see you, he said, dismounting. I heard your aunt is sending you to Ohio. Is it true? Ophelia's face crumpled. Yes, she has me locked in my room except for meals. The train leaves in 11 days. Vincent, I do not know what to do. I cannot go to Ohio. I cannot leave you. Then do not, Vincent said. The idea had been forming in his mind for days. Wild and reckless, but also right. Come with me. Tonight. We will leave Ordway. Start somewhere new. I know it is asking a lot, and I know we will have to struggle at first. But we will be together, Ophelia. Is not that worth more than comfort or respectability? Ophelia stared down at him, her heart pounding. He was asking her to run away with him, to give up everything she had ever known for an uncertain future. It was madness. It was scandalous. It was everything her aunt and the townspeople would condemn her for. It was also the only thing that felt right. Yes, she said, the word coming out strong and sure. Yes, I will come with you. Just give me a few minutes to pack. She disappeared from the window, and Vincent paced nervously, every nerve on high alert for any sign of discovery. After what felt like an eternity, the back door opened and Ophelia emerged carrying a small carpet bag. She had changed into a practical traveling dress and boots, and her hair was pinned up securely. Vincent's heart swelled with love and admiration for her bravery. He helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. With one arm wrapped securely around her waist, he urged the horse into a canter, heading north out of town. They did not stop until Ordway was far behind them, until the lights of the town had disappeared into the darkness. Finally, Vincent pulled the horse to a stop beside a small stand of trees. He helped Ophelia down, and they stood facing each other in the moonlight. Are you sure about this? He asked, needing to give her one last chance to change her mind. Once we are gone, there is no going back. Your reputation will be destroyed. Your aunt will disown you. We will have to start over with almost nothing. Ophelia reached up and cupped his face in her hands. I have never been more sure of anything, she said. I do not care about my reputation. I do not care about my aunt's money or approval. All I care about is you, is us. Wherever you go, I want to be with you. Vincent pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It was their first real kiss, and it was everything Ophelia had dreamed it would be. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, his arms strong around her, and she felt like she was home. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Vincent pressed his forehead against hers. I promise you, he said quietly. I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret this choice. I will work as hard as I have to in order to give you a good life. You will never want for anything, Ophelia. I swear it. I already have everything I need, Ophelia replied, her fingers tangling in his hair. I have you. They rode through the night, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Ordway. Vincent knew Aunt Margaret would raise the alarm when she discovered Ophelia missing, and he wanted to be far away before any search parties were organized. They traveled northeast, toward the Kansas border, stopping only to rest the horse and grab a few hours of sleep. By the time the sun rose, painting the Colorado plains in shades of gold and pink, they were more than 50 miles from Ordway. They stopped beside a creek to let the horse drink and to eat the bread and cheese Ophelia had grabbed from the kitchen before leaving. They were both exhausted, but also exhilarated, giddy with the freedom of being together without having to hide. Where are we going? Ophelia asked as they sat side by side on the creek bank, sharing their meager breakfast. I have been thinking about that, Vincent said. There is a town in Kansas, about 3 days' ride from here. It is called Ellsworth. I worked on a ranch near there a couple years ago, and the owner was a good man. He might be willing to hire us both. You could work in the house, cooking and cleaning, and I could work as a hand. It would not be glamorous, but we could save up money, start building a real life. It sounds perfect, Ophelia said, and she meant it. She did not need glamour or luxury. She just needed purpose and security, and Vincent by her side. They traveled for 3 days, sleeping under the stars and surviving on the supplies Vincent had in his saddlebags, supplemented by whatever they could forage or buy in the tiny settlements they passed through. Ophelia had never spent so much time outdoors, had never realized how vast and beautiful the world was beyond the confines of towns and houses. At night, Vincent would point out constellations and tell her stories about the stars, and she would fall asleep in his arms, feeling safer than she had since her parents died. On the morning of the 4th day, they rode into Ellsworth. It was a bustling town, larger than Ordway, with a main street lined with shops and saloons and a church at the far end. Vincent led them to a ranch about 5 miles outside of town, a sprawling property with a large ranch house, several barns, and corrals full of horses and cattle. The owner, a grizzled man in his 60s named John McAllister, remembered Vincent and greeted him warmly. His expression grew curious when he saw Ophelia, but he listened without judgment as Vincent explained their situation, leaving out only the most scandalous details. So you need work, both of you, Mr. McAllister said, stroking his gray beard thoughtfully. And you are looking to get married soon, I assume? As soon as we can arrange it, Vincent confirmed, his hand tight around Ophelia's. We want to do everything proper from here on out. Mr. McAllister studied them both for a long moment, and Ophelia held her breath, praying he would not turn them away. Finally, the older man smiled. I like you, Lawson. You always were a hard worker, and I appreciate a man who is willing to fight for what he wants. And Miss Winters, you have a brave look about you. I think you will do just fine here. He gestured toward a small cabin near the main house. That cabin there is empty. It is not much, just 2 rooms, but it is clean and sturdy. You two can stay there. Vincent, you will work with the other hands. Miss Winters, my wife Sarah, could use help in the house and with the cooking. If you are both willing to work hard, we will pay you fair wages and give you room and board. Does that sound acceptable? Ophelia felt tears of relief and gratitude prick her eyes. More than acceptable, she said. Thank you, Mr. McAllister. Thank you so much. Do not thank me yet, the older man said with a chuckle. You have not seen how much work running this place requires. But you are welcome here. Lord knows we can always use good help. He paused. Now, about getting married. The preacher in town is a friend of mine. I will send word that you two need a quick ceremony. If you are serious about doing things proper, the sooner you are wed, the better. 2 days later, Ophelia stood in the small church in Ellsworth, wearing a simple blue dress that Sarah McAllister had helped her alter to fit better. Vincent stood beside her in a clean shirt and his best pants, his hair neatly combed and his face freshly shaven. There were no guests except for the McAllisters and a few of the ranch hands who had befriended Vincent. There were no flowers or fancy decorations. But when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, and Vincent kissed her for the second time in her life, Ophelia felt like the luckiest woman in the world. They moved into the little cabin that evening, and for the first time, they were truly alone and truly together. Vincent carried her over the threshold, making her laugh, and then set her down gently in the middle of the small main room. There was a fireplace against one wall, a rough-hewn table and 2 chairs, and a door leading to a bedroom with a simple bed and a trunk for storing clothes. "It is not much," Vincent said, suddenly nervous, "but it is ours." "It is perfect," Ophelia said, and she meant it. This small cabin was hers in a way her aunt's house never had been, in a way even her childhood home had not been. This was a place she and Vincent would build together, a place where they could be themselves without fear or judgment. Their wedding night was tender and a little awkward, both of them new to the intimacy of marriage, but also beautiful. Vincent was gentle and patient, and Ophelia felt cherished in a way she had never imagined. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, talking and laughing until exhaustion finally claimed them. The months that followed were hard work, but also deeply fulfilling. Vincent rose before dawn to work with the cattle and horses, mending fences and breaking colts, and doing all the 1,000 tasks that kept a ranch running. Ophelia worked alongside Sarah McAllister in the big house, learning to cook for the dozen ranch hands who lived on the property, to preserve vegetables for the winter, to churn butter and bake bread, and mend clothing. The work was exhausting, but it was also satisfying in a way nothing in Ordway had been. She was contributing, building something real. In the evenings, she and Vincent would return to their little cabin and have supper together, talking about their days and making plans for the future. Vincent was saving every penny he could, determined to buy his own land someday. Ophelia helped by taking in mending from some of the other ranches in the area, her skilled seamstress fingers flying as she repaired torn shirts and worn work pants. As winter approached, Ophelia realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She and Vincent had hoped for children eventually, but they had been married less than 6 months. Their financial situation was still precarious, and the thought of bringing a new life into the world was overwhelming. But when she told Vincent, his reaction erased all her fears. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Ophelia asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy?" Vincent set her down and cupped her face in his hands, his eyes shining with tears. "Ophelia, I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and so grateful. You have given me everything, a home, a purpose, and now a family. I love you so much." Their son was born in April of 1883, a squalling, healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's expressive eyes. They named him Samuel after Vincent's grandfather, the one member of his family Vincent had truly loved. Holding his son for the first time, Vincent felt something inside him settle and root deep. This was what he had been searching for all those years of drifting, not just a place, but a purpose, people to love and protect, a reason to build something lasting. Ophelia recovered quickly from the birth, thanks in part to Sarah McAllister's experienced care. She threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, learning to balance caring for Samuel with her work in the big house. Sarah was understanding, allowing Ophelia to bring the baby with her while she worked, and the ranch hands were charmed by the little boy, often stopping by to make faces at him or bring him small carved toys. As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, Vincent's dream of owning his own land began to take concrete shape. He and Ophelia had saved every spare penny for 3 years, and Mr. McAllister, impressed by Vincent's work ethic and integrity, offered to sell him a parcel of land on the edge of his property at a fair price. It was not much, only 40 acres, but it included a good water source and enough grazing land to support a small herd of cattle. With the help of the other ranch hands, Vincent built a modest house on their new land. It was bigger than the cabin, with 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a sitting room with a stone fireplace. Ophelia cried the first time she walked through the door, overwhelmed by the realization that this was truly theirs, built by Vincent's hands, paid for with their hard work and sacrifice. They moved in the spring of 1886, and Ophelia immediately set about making the house a home. She planted a garden near the kitchen, growing vegetables and herbs. She sewed curtains for the windows and quilts for the beds. She filled the house with small touches that made it warm and welcoming. And Vincent worked from dawn to dusk, building his herd, caring for his land, proving to himself and everyone else that the wandering cowboy had finally found a place to settle. Their second child, a daughter they named Caroline, was born in 1887. She had Ophelia's dark hair and Vincent's whiskey-colored eyes, and she was as fearless and adventurous as her parents. Samuel adored his baby sister, appointing himself her protector from the moment she came home. Life was not easy. There were bad years when the weather did not cooperate, when cattle got sick, when money was tight. But there were also good years, years when the herd thrived and the garden overflowed and they could afford small luxuries like store-bought fabric or new boots for the children. Through it all, Vincent and Ophelia faced everything together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. They never heard from Aunt Margaret again. Ophelia had written her a letter shortly after the wedding, explaining her choice and asking for understanding, if not approval. The letter was never answered, and when Ophelia inquired through an old friend in Ordway, she learned that her aunt had told everyone Ophelia had died of illness, too ashamed to admit her niece had run away with a cowboy. The news hurt, but Ophelia found she could not regret her choice. Her life with Vincent was everything she had dreamed of, and more. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent surprised Ophelia by taking her back to the willow trees where they had spent those secret afternoons so long ago. The trip to Ordway took 2 days, and they left the children with Sarah McAllister, who was now like a grandmother to them. Standing under those same branches, watching the creek flow past, just as it always had, Ophelia felt the weight of everything they had built together. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" Vincent asked, his arm around her waist. "You told me you wanted freedom and to matter to someone." "I remember," Ophelia said softly. "I was so lost then, so desperate to escape." "And now?" Vincent asked, turning her to face him. Ophelia looked up at the man who had danced with her in the rain all those years ago, the man who had seen her when no one else would, who had chosen her despite the cost. His face was more lined now, weathered by sun and wind and hard work, but his eyes still held the same warmth, the same love. "Now I am found," she said simply. "I am free in all the ways that matter, and I matter to you and to our children. You gave me everything I wanted, Vincent. You gave me a life worth living." "You gave me the same," Vincent replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I was just drifting before I met you, going through the motions. But you made me want to stop, to build something real. You made me want to be better. Everything good in my life started the day I saw you dancing in that rain." They held each other under the willows, two people who had found each other against all odds, and built a life that was richer than anything they could have imagined. The town of Ordway had moved on, barely remembering the scandal of the girl who danced in the rain and the cowboy who danced with her. But Vincent and Ophelia remembered, treasured that moment as the beginning of everything. As the years passed, their family grew and prospered. Samuel grew into a strong, reliable young man who worked the ranch alongside his father, learning everything Vincent could teach him about cattle and horses and land management. Caroline grew into a spirited young woman who inherited her mother's independence and her father's determination. She had no interest in the traditional path of marriage and domesticity, instead helping her brother and father with the ranch work, riding as well as any man, and refusing to be limited by anyone's expectations of what a woman should be. Ophelia and Vincent encouraged her, remembering too well how it felt to be constrained by society's narrow rules. In 1895, they welcomed a third child, a surprise late in Ophelia's life, another son, whom they named Thomas. His birth reminded them both of how blessed they were, how far they had come from those desperate days when they ran away together with nothing but love and hope. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the work was done, Vincent and Ophelia would sit on the porch of their house and watch the sun set over the land they had built together. They would hold hands, comfortable in the silence that came from knowing each other completely, and they would remember. They remembered dancing in the rain, soaked through and laughing while the town looked on in judgment. They remembered secret meetings under willow trees, stolen moments when the world felt like it belonged to just them. They remembered the wild ride through the night, running toward an uncertain future with nothing but faith in each other. They remembered the struggles and the triumphs, the hard work and the joy, the children and the home and the life they had created from nothing. And when Vincent would pull Ophelia close and whisper that he loved her, that choosing her was the best decision he ever made, Ophelia would kiss him and whisper back that she loved him too, that she would choose him again and again in every lifetime, in every storm, because some loves are worth dancing in the rain for, worth risking everything for, worth building a life on. And the love between a girl who danced like a child and the cowboy who danced with her until they were soaked was exactly that kind of love, the kind that lasted forever, the kind that built legacies, the kind that made all the struggle and sacrifice worthwhile. Years later, when they were old and gray, surrounded by children and grandchildren who listened eagerly to the story of how they met, Vincent and Ophelia would still look at each other with the same wonder and love they had felt that rainy day in 1882. And when the story was told, when the grandchildren were sent off to bed, they would step outside together and lift their faces to the sky, hoping for rain, because rain meant joy and freedom and new beginnings. Rain meant the start of everything good in their lives. Rain meant love. And on the rare occasions when rain did fall on their land in Colorado, no matter how old they were, Vincent would take Ophelia's hand and lead her out into the downpour, and they would dance just as they had all those years ago, two people who had chosen each other and never regretted it for a single moment. They would spin and laugh and let the water soak them through, and anyone watching would see not just an old couple being foolish, but two souls who had found each other against all odds and held on tight through everything life threw at them. Their story became legend in the family, passed down through generations. The tale of the girl who was shunned for dancing in the rain like a child, and the cowboy who loved her enough to dance with her until they were soaked. It became a reminder that true love means accepting someone exactly as they are, that courage means choosing your own path even when the world condemns you, and that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the moments when you stop caring what anyone else thinks and just let yourself be free. Vincent Lawson and Ophelia Winters built a life that spanned decades, raised children who became good, strong people, created a legacy that lasted long after they were gone. But the foundation of everything was that single moment of connection in the rain when a lonely cowboy saw a girl dancing and decided to join her, consequences be damned. That moment of bravery and spontaneity and pure, honest love changed both their lives forever, transforming them from two lost souls into a family, a partnership, a love story for the ages. When Vincent passed away in 1925, at the age of 68, surrounded by his family in the house he had built with his own hands, his last words were for Ophelia. "Thank you for dancing with me," he whispered, his weathered hand clutching hers. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for loving me." Ophelia held him close, tears streaming down her face, and whispered back, "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for giving me this beautiful life." She lived another 3 years, long enough to see her grandchildren grown, long enough to know that the life she and Vincent had built would continue long after she was gone. And when it was her time to go, she went peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her lips, dreaming of a rainy day in Ordway, and a handsome cowboy extending his hand and asking her to dance. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their land, under the wide Colorado sky they both loved. The stone was simple, bearing their names and dates and a single line chosen by their children. They danced in the rain and found forever. And on summer afternoons, when thunderstorms rolled across the plains and rain fell on the earth, some of the old timers in the area swore they could hear laughter on the wind, the sound of two people dancing in the rain, their joy echoing across the years. Because love like that does not die. It lives on in the stories told, in the children raised, in the land tended, in the memories cherished. It lives on in every person who chooses courage over comfort, love over propriety, freedom over fear. The story of Vincent and Ophelia became more than just a family legend. It became a reminder that the best things in life often come from the moments when we dare to be ourselves, when we choose connection over conformity, when we reach out to someone who needs us and say, I see you, and you are not alone. It became a testament to the power of love to transform lives, to build futures, to create beauty from nothing but determination and devotion. Their children carried forward the values Vincent and Ophelia had lived by. Samuel built his own ranch adjacent to his parents' land, expanding the family holdings and ensuring that future generations would have a place to call home. Caroline eventually married a man who respected her independence and her skills, and together they ran a successful horse breeding operation. Thomas, the surprise late-in-life baby, became a teacher dedicated to ensuring that children in rural areas had access to education and opportunity. All of them, in their own ways, honored the legacy of their parents by living authentically, by refusing to be limited by others' expectations, by choosing love and courage over fear and conformity. They told their children the story of the rain dance, of the cowboy, and the girl who defied a judgmental town and built something beautiful together. And those children told their children, and so the story spread, taking on the quality of myth but always rooted in the truth of what had really happened. In the end, that is what Vincent and Ophelia left behind. Not just land or money or material possessions, but a story of love that inspired generations. A reminder that one moment of courage can change everything, that choosing to dance in the rain when everyone else seeks shelter can lead to the most extraordinary life. A testament to the truth that real love sees us at our most authentic and says, yes, this is who I choose. Their love story became part of the fabric of the land itself, woven into the history of Colorado ranching, whispered about in general stores and saloons, told around campfires and dinner tables. And whenever someone heard the story and asked if it was really true, if people really could build a life that way, on nothing but love and determination, those who knew the story well would smile and say, yes, it is all true, every word of it. And it can happen to you too if you are brave enough to dance in the rain.